Hello, good evening, team. You can vote. We're so grateful for you being here tonight, spending your time learning about our plans and our ambitious goals for 2024, learning about where we've been and where we're going to, and all sorts of new tools and resources that we are publishing now and will be publishing over the summer to help you and your communities get registered, get educated, and get empowered to vote. So we're going to be going over our key priorities and goals. I'll be sharing that with you momentarily. Caitlin is going to go over the changes to 2024 voting rules and some of the challenges that we're facing ahead, and talk a little bit about what we saw in the primary and what we're expecting. Cherie is going to share education tools that we have made for you. Let's get going. This is our 10-year anniversary here with You Can Vote. We just celebrated in Durham a 10-year party at the Durham Arts Council, and our fabulous host committee raised the money to make this possible, and our board of directors were there, and we really set the stage for the work to come and the endurance and the strength that we have built over the past 10 years of navigating ever-changing election laws, multiple changes to rules each and every cycle, on again, off again photo ID rules, flip-flops on eligibility, tons and tons of new maps and unconstitutional maps, legal challenges, and we've got more surely ahead of us here in 2024, and that Caitlin will talk about in a bit. But I just want to extend my gratitude to everyone who's been with us for this cycle and any and all previous cycles that we've been at this work, helping our neighbors vote and navigate these changes to voting laws, and empowering them to still use their voice. And so You Can Vote, this is our vision. It's a big vision. And with our mission of educating and registering voters and empowering y'all to get out in your communities and get it done, we believe that we're working towards this vision of a representative democracy that reflects the diversity, the wonderful diversity across our state, and includes all voices and aims to serve all North Carolinians. And with this work every day in and out in the community, we're getting us closer to our goal of everyone having that voice and knowing that their voice really matters and counts. So it's 2024. It's a big year, presidential election year, which means everything is going to be happening in North Carolina. And remember, last presidential election cycle was 2020. It was a pandemic. A lot of people voted by mail. That's a lot harder now than it was in 2020. So we'll talk. Caitlin will go over a little bit about that as well. But we're looking forward to a big year here for North Carolina. And so our goal is to train 2,400 volunteers this year on the new rules on how to talk about voting, to power and bring people into the process, and not to add to the confusion, because there's a lot of confusion out there. And I say, if you're going to be working with a voter, if you want to help voters in North Carolina, you got to come to get a training, get the foundational knowledge, because voters are confused, and volunteers, everything has changed since the last time you volunteered with us. So we need to get the new script, come out, work with us. But even if you don't, we want everyone to attend a You Can Vote training this year. And we've already trained over 600 people this year, so we're well on our way to get to that 2,400 trained volunteers. We're also going to educate 240,000 voters face to face. And where do we do this? We work across the state. We have offices in Charlotte, in Winston-Salem, in Greensboro, in Durham, in Raleigh. We cover Joco. We're in Onslow, Jacksonville, New Hanover, Wilmington, Brunswick, and places in between. We're going out west and doing a training in Asheville this spring as well, so that we can go into the schools. We get invited into schools, into classrooms and college classrooms. We're going to be working inside the jails again this summer, helping folks get registered and request that absentee ballot so they can vote by mail from jail. We get invited into hospitals, into clinics, into community events, healthcare events, festivals, you name it, we're there. And we're well on our way. We've been in high schools across the state here this spring, been across college campuses, and this summer is just all about community. So we really want you to come out and help us reach this goal of educating 240,000 voters with our quality services. And by having these conversations, these quality conversations, talking with folks, meeting them where they are, understanding their concerns, overcoming some misconceptions, because everybody we talk to has a misconception or two about voting. We're going to register 24,000 voters this year. We're checking everyone's registration. It is so important that folks are registered in the county where they want to be a voter in November. You wait until November 4th to change your registration or to look up your registration, and it's too late. If you're registered in Charlotte and you're in school in Durham, you would have to go back to Charlotte to make your vote count for Election Day. So we're having all of these conversations, checking all these registrations to be sure folks are registered correctly. And registration got harder. Caitlin's going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to empower voters and protect their votes, making sure that those votes count. And right now, the protecting the vote is verifying everyone's registration and doing it right. We're going to remind all of the voters we register with a phone call, and they're appreciative. The phone calls we did for the primary, folks, most people on that call list were under 25 years old, and they remembered us, and they had questions about what to bring for ID, where to go, and we're sending them text messages reminding them how they can look up their early voting location. These are great phone calls. They're warm phone calls, and the voters are really happy for these conversations that we're having with them over the phone to help them vote. So look out for our Get Out the Vote phone banks coming this fall, because we will need you to help make folks plans to vote. And I say it every single day to every single person I talk to all of our partners. If you want to help voters this year, come to a You Can Vote training. We got you. Even if you don't volunteer with us on a shift, you will be more prepared with quality information, fact-based information that is specific to North Carolina, specific to the populations that we serve, and easy to understand English and Spanish. So come get trained by us before going out to do any sort of voter education event, even if it's not on a You Can Vote shift. The thing that we're seeing and the thing that we know is that most voters are interested. Most people are pretty interested in elections, but they need that support. They need support in order to make their vote count. We cannot take anything for granted. Start at the foundations. We don't really have to go too big into the why vote. It's how, and making sure people are prepared. So what we're doing, like I said, we're verifying on our fridge cards, our handy dandy fridge cards. We have got excuse me, I need a prop. We've got a QR code at the bottom. And every single person we talk to, we're going to have them pull out their phone and check their voter registration. This is a really good skill to have to make sure that you know how to look yourself up, look up your sample ballots, look up your polling locations, look up your districts. But we then can see, is like, do you still live here? We need you to register where you're going to be in November. So that's what we're doing out with our handy dandy fridge cards, and Cherie will go over more of that in a minute. And North Carolina is a battleground state, and there's a lot of money being spent in North Carolina right now. So you're going to see folks, brand new people from everywhere out there doing some sort of, canvassing, door knocking, you name it. And a lot of new groups come in, or groups that haven't worked in North Carolina yet. And so if you see a group out there and they might be saying something wrong, or you think that they should work with us, make sure you spread the word and tell them that we have all of these resources in North Carolina. We try to make ourselves the easy button for civic engagement. It's really hard to keep up with these changing laws, and national groups can't always keep up with the little minor changes that we have to keep up with in order to make sure the voters that we register actually get on the voting rolls. So we're expecting more changes. We're expecting everyone to come in. There's going to be candidate visits. So it'll be a very noisy election year, and we're just going to embrace it because that's what we have seen in the past, and we're ready and flexible in order to manage this. Another thing is so important that we're doing this year to help voters is we're not going to do any harm. We're not going to say anything that might cause them to stay home on election day. So we're staying positive, we're staying on message, and we're making sure that everything that we say is accurate in terms of their eligibility. That has changed multiple times in the past few years. Deadlines for mail-in ballots, there's no grace period anymore. Caitlin will talk about that too. So we have to be very careful and make sure that anything that we're using is informed by either the State Board of Elections, which we draw our information from, or you can vote an organization that can really keep up with the really important critical details, such as this new registration form, and helping folks understand the rules around photo ID. It's a lot of confusion around photo ID, and we have very specific messaging around that and education materials. So we're offering that every week. We're having trainings online. Anyone can join. And because we know how important this is, that's why we are ensuring these quality and consistency in our trainings. And retraining. We will retrain you if something changes. We just had to retrain all of our volunteers on the new voter registration form in January. And we're going to be ensuring that we have rapid response communication tools and messaging, because we know there's going to be a law change. There's going to be a court ruling. So everything that we have is dated with the date that it goes into effect. And we have a few less print materials because we know how quickly things can change. So we only order as much as we need for the immediate future, because I don't like throwing away materials that are outdated right after we order them. And we're keeping it simple. Folks just need to know the basics. They don't need to know the pending legislation, or this could change, or this might change, or it used to be like this, but now it's harder. Talking about voter suppression, talking about depressed turnout actually depresses turnout. So that's why we're keeping it simple. We got to meet people exactly where they are. If they're not registered, it's getting them registered and helping them understand where the early voting locations and what that's going to look like. Some people are already registered and they just need a helpful guide for voting and early voting schedules. Some people want more information on what's on their ballot, learning all of those offices and how to find trusted resources to research your ballot. And we've got some exciting stuff coming up, adding that piece into our program. So keeping it simple, getting folks registered at the right location, and making that solid plan to vote is one of the most effective things that we know can help increase turnout and make sure folks do not get turned away at any early voting or election day voting site this cycle. And now, with a drum roll, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin Metzger, You Can Vote's Deputy Director, who's going to share where we've been, what we're facing this year, a little bit about the primary turnout, and then Cherie will take over after Caitlin. So here she is.
Hello, You Can Voters. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I am Caitlin Metzger. I'm going to handle this next section, and just keep in mind we do have the chat. We'll be answering questions at the end. So I saw a couple coming in, but we will get to them, I promise. All right, so as Kate mentioned, and I hope you know, we are in 2024. We've already held an election this year. There's one happening starting next week for the runoff. There have already been some changes. So just want to make sure that everyone's clear on what's new right now so far for 2024. The voter registration rules and application has changed. If you haven't done a shift with us or haven't come to a training yet, we really recommend you coming and learning. The major change is that the entire form changes. It looks different. We are still using the paper form because we find that we can guarantee that it goes through. We still deliver those, hand deliver those to the State Board of Elections. The online portal for DMV customers is still an option, but it is a little bit harder to use, right? So we are still using the paper form. It did get a major change, a major facelift this year, so it looks quite different. There's also a new section that is required now. So if you're familiar with the voter registration application, box 3 has identifying numbers like the last 4 digits of your social, your driver's license number, and it used to have your voter ID number. That section is now required. So voters do need to know their they need to list their full date of birth and also know either their last 4 of their social or their North Carolina driver's license number. So that is required. You might imagine that some of the folks who might not know that those numbers are generally young people or are elderly folks, sometimes people with disabilities and students. So we are working really hard to make sure that everyone knows that the new form is out, that we're using the new form, and most critically, that it's completely accurate. Voters who turn in a form without box 3 completed will get it should get a mailing from the State Board of Elections, but we know that that process is not perfect. And sometimes people don't check their mail very often, right? So what we want to do and what we're committed to is making sure that all registrants that we talk to know what's required and fill out those forms fully and completely with accurate information. There's more information on our website. That short link is here. The vote by mail deadline has changed, and the postage has increased, and the requirements have changed. I will talk about this now, but just caveat that this is one of the things that may change again over the summer. What we recommend is that if you're talking to anyone who plans to vote by mail, right? If you know a friend who's living in a senior facility, if you have a friend or family member who may be in jail, if you know someone who's going to be studying abroad, all of these folks who might not be thinking right now about voting in November, just run through a little list in your mind and see, can you think of anyone who might need this information? That form, remember that the absentee ballot request form is specific to every election. So it's critical that they use the correct form and mark that they want to request a ballot for the 2024 general election. The first step before they request is to be registered correctly. So you've got to be registered. You've got to use the correct form to request your ballot. Now, North Carolina does still have ballot tracks, which was a great tool that started in 2020 for North Carolinians. That's where you can do the full request online and track your ballot. Some of you may have used it. You can actually see when it's requested, when it's received. That is still an option. It is through the State Board of Elections website. But just keep in mind, the first step before you can request is that you've got to be registered. So that's why, again, as Kate mentioned, we're working really hard to make sure we verify every single voter we talk to is either registered to vote already or we get them registered right then and there on the spot. The postage requirement has gone up to return an absentee ballot. So again, think through anyone that you know that might be wanting to vote by mail and make sure that they know the cost to mail back a ballot has increased in 2024. It did increase a little bit in 2023. That was the first time that we implemented the voter ID requirement. And the reason is because the envelope is a 3-fold envelope to account for that copy of a photo identification. So there are requirements to include a copy of your photo ID to vote by mail. There is still an exception form, similar to if you go to vote in person. But because of the way that has to be mailed, the envelope size is much bigger. That means that the price went up. So one forever stamp doesn't cut it. People have to have, I think it's $1.67 or dollars, more than a forever stamp. And folks have got to be ready to pay that, or they can hand deliver their ballot to the Board of Elections. Now, the requirement to get it back in time is also a major thing that changed. Again, this is very specific to vote by mail. And historically, in 2020, people got really used to that because it was actually easier to vote during that pandemic time. One major change that I want to make sure you know is that 3-day grace period for the ballot to arrive is no longer there. So what that means is that all North Carolinians who vote by mail must have their absentee ballot delivered and to the Board of Elections on Election Day, which this fall is November 5th. So that means if you put it in the mail on Monday the 4th, it's not going to count, right? Even if you get it postmarked, maybe on the 1st and it might not arrive, it's not a guarantee that it will be counted unless you know that it's gotten there. So what does that mean for our work and what you can do to help your neighbors vote is if you know you want to vote by mail, do it fast, do it quick, right? Let's start having those absentee parties in July. If you're going to do that with your family, if you know someone who's studying abroad, again, start sooner rather than later. We would recommend doing that in July or August at the latest. But as we get closer to November, the deadline to request will be in October. But at that point, remember, we're in a federal presidential election year. There's going to be a lot of mail at that point. So we really recommend not waiting until September, October. Do that soon if you're going to do it. Photo ID. I hope that a lot of folks on the call participated in our municipal election last year, if you had one. We did have that new requirement in place. So the law for photo ID started in this form, in this iteration in 2023. What's new for 2024 is that a whole lot of people didn't vote last year, right? So a whole lot of people don't have that experience with voting with a photo ID. We also just had an election on March 5th. We had a primary and a whole lot of people got to experience that, but more people didn't, right? So what we're looking into in the fall is that we expect much higher turnout for a general election with fewer people with that experience. And because we follow the data and we know that voting is a habit, what we're expecting is that there may be quite a few people, a whole lot of young people especially, who are going to be voting for the first time, maybe ever, but probably the first time being asked to show a photo ID. So there is a lot of details on our website. The State Board of Elections will send out a judicial guide closer to the election with those details. And then, as always, remember that you can vote with or without ID. There is an exception form. So the vast majority of people who voted in the primary, as well as the municipal last year, didn't have trouble showing their driver's license. That's the most common accepted form of ID. But for people who don't have don't have a passport, maybe their student ID is not accepted. Maybe they have a passport, but it's expired for more than a year. All the different ins and outs of that rule. There is a way to vote still. So what we don't want to do is scare people and suppress turnout, as Kate was mentioning, by saying every single person has got to have a photo ID and making it sound more intimidating when most people are going to have a photo ID. And we got to make sure people know there's an exception form if you don't have one. We do have that full list on our fridge card. So again, we invite you to come to the training, learn all about that, come do shifts with us and talk to voters. For the vast majority of people we talk to, they're not sure about photo ID or they have a question about it. So the conversations that we're having are really helpful to help people think through, do I have what I need for the fall? And we're having those quality conversations as we've been doing already all year long. The next thing that has changed again in 2024 is new maps, right? We had a redistricting process a little bit out of the blue in 2023. We got new maps in the legislature and for Congress. That was litigated again. But what we have now is what's in place for 2024. So I encourage, again, you're probably picking up on a theme here. We're going to keep talking about the voter lookup. The number one thing that you and everyone that you know in North Carolina can do is make sure you know that you are registered and that you know what district you live in. That's also where your sample ballot will be. What we saw in the primary in March is that some folks went to vote and saw some congressional candidate names that they did not recognize, right? Because they're in a new district now. So we want to make sure people know before the fall, these are the districts we have. Those are in place, as I said, at least through the fall of 2024. And so we really recommend using that voter lookup, helping folks look themselves up, make sure folks know youcanvote.org/lookup. That is a direct link that goes straight to the State Board of Elections. Again, there are going to be some national groups that come in and have that and say that they're going to do the sample lookup or the check-in, and they're going to ask people's name and information. Unless it's that state board's website, though, it might be out of date, right? And we have seen this before too. Some of the national databases can't keep up. So we really recommend using the North Carolina State Board of Elections lookup tool. It says that in the left corner when you go to that website, you put in your first name, your last name, and search, and you should see that you're registered, that you're active, and then you should see your districts there. Now, if you do look yourself up and it says inactive, that's okay, right? What are you going to do? You're going to look for one of the friendly folks in orange and get registered. Being inactive does not mean that you cannot vote. It just means maybe you haven't voted in a while. Maybe you moved. Maybe you need to update. But the best thing to do is look yourself up and just make sure you know. All right, a couple ongoing challenges that we are looking into or kind of expecting over the summer. You may have seen the news. There's another federal, well, this is federal, not state, federal photo ID trial. It starts in a couple weeks in Winston-Salem. We hope and expect that there will be a decision this summer. It's hopefully going to be a kind of a quick trial with a decision, but we don't know for sure, right? We hope that and we think that, but we're not sure. So the challenge there is that we don't want to get into this what if question. Like Kate was mentioning, it's not usually helpful to talk to a brand new voter about what possibly maybe could happen. So our materials still reflect what is the current law. If something changes, we're going to update everything. So don't worry. There's a different litigation over same-day registration that potentially could change how early voting runs in the fall. Again, we don't know yet if that's going to move forward or not, but if it does, we'll keep you updated. What it could do is change, well, we're not sure, could change the availability of early voting, the length of early voting, or the mail-in process, the verification process. So that challenge is underway. As of right now, we still have our full 17 days. Same-day registration is offered only during early voting, and that's the best thing that we can always rely on. So we've continued to tell voters early voting is the best option, right? We're always going to recommend that. The legislative session, we do have our North Carolina House and North Carolina Senate coming back into session later this month. I put that on here because we're not sure what's going to happen. Oftentimes in the summer short session, there may be a voting law change. That has happened many times, right? And I don't know what it might be, but we'll see. That is a challenge because we're not sure, right? And we like to plan in this business. We like to print things. We like to know what to expect. But as Kate mentioned at the very beginning, we've been doing this for 10 years. Every single year, something has changed. So I want us all to embrace the chaos a little bit. I know it can be a little bit frustrating or scary, but we know that we're still going to be here, right? We know that no matter what the law is, we are going to make sure voters have access to that ballot. And so we encourage and invite you to stay with us and help make sure that everyone gets those updates. Then lastly, the national groups coming into North Carolina. That is on the challenge list here because often that means that inexperienced people come in meaning well, right? They want to help with GOTV messaging, but sometimes they might be a little uninformed about North Carolina voting rules. They might be uninformed about the redistricting process. They might be uninformed about photo ID. So that is just something to look out for. Again, we are a battleground state, so we expect there to be a lot of attention. We have a very popular governor's race that people are watching. The entire General Assembly is on the ballot. Superintendent of Public Instruction's on the ballot, county commissioners on the ballot, school boards on the ballot. We got a lot of good stuff happening, right? There's a lot of power that's going to be decided. And with that comes a lot of national money or national campaigns that are going to be focusing on North Carolina. So we are ready for that. What we can do about it is coming up next. We are going to stay doing what we do, right? Our mission has not changed in 10 years. We need you to talk to more voters, and we're going to try to expand our teams and talk to as many people as we can. We want to be laser focused, stay laser focused on systematically helping people build this habit of voting, right? We're going to stay committed to accurate, complete, timely voter registration forms. That means we got to talk to all those people, right? Kate threw out that number. Looks like a lot, 250,000 people. We got to talk to all those people out of 7 million, more than 7 million voters in North Carolina, and make sure they know, here's the mechanics, here's what you need to know, here's where to go, here's how to register. We're going to talk about the 3 ways to vote, right? As always, it's on the fridge card. We're going to make sure that folks know there's a little bit of slight difference to each one, right? But to have options and to have your pick of which way that you want to vote, whether you choose to vote by mail, early voting, or on election day, the number one thing you got to do is be registered, right? In order to have an option, you've got to be registered. Related to that, we want to advocate for strong early voting plans. This was in our weekly email today because that deadline is usually later in the summer, and those plans are actually due next month. So we should know the early voting plans for fall in May, right? It's earlier than we've seen in a really long time, maybe if ever. What we can do for that, check that email link, and we'll drop some links in the chat at the end. What you can do is stand up for campus sites, making sure that voters on campuses, student voters, have access to early voting. You can stand up to make sure that locations with great parking and great areas for curbside voting, and locations that are well-known and trusted in your community are chosen for early voting sites. That's another thing you can do. And then train leaders and support our volunteers and fellows. And our staffers. We just celebrated our party last week. We are going to continue to try to raise our fundraising goals and make sure that we can expand who we're training, and invest in local leaders to make sure that the messages are getting out. If you know someone who's new to North Carolina or someone who's been here forever and is a trusted messenger, we need them on our team. And so we'd love for you to share the training link and make sure that they know that we can equip them with all the tools that they need to share that with their constituents. All right, really quick. What we know is that still from 2014, when we started, canvassing is still the #1 most effective method of raising turnout. What we know and what we saw in the primary, what we saw in 22, what we saw in 2020, what we saw in 2016, is that canvassing, meaning talking one-on-one to people, is the single most effective method of voter turnout. 1 new voter per 16 contacts. So if you know that if you've been a volunteer with us on a shift, you talk to about 40, 50 people on a shift, right? Right there, you might register 2 or 3, but of those 40 people that you give a fridge card to, we consider that a conversation, a canvassing conversation. That is 1 new voter per 16 people we talk to, plus their household, right? So that is what we're going to still do. A lot of groups are going to go door to door. We don't have plans to do that because we are in high traffic areas all the time. We're in classrooms, we're at festivals, we're on campuses, we're out where people are, and we can talk to those folks in an hour or an hour and a half. Phone calls, that is an option, and some groups are going to do that. Direct mail, some groups are going to do that. SMS texting. Keep in mind that only 1 new voter per 312 people who get a text message. And I don't know about you, but I've already started getting text messages. In general, most of them just say, it's an election year, go vote, right? They don't mention the mechanics of voting. They don't say, here are the North Carolina rules. Here's how you find your sample ballot. Here's the details that you need to know for photo ID. It just says go vote. So what we find is that people need that specific conversation. Again, back to the mechanics. People just need to know what to bring, where to go, what to expect. And that is much more effective. And it's much easier to do with a face-to-face conversation, right? It's hard to explain everything that I'm explaining right now in a text message. So we're not going to do that, right? It's hard to do that on a mailer. We're not going to do that. And then also just keep in mind, voter registration is a highly effective tactic, especially in a presidential year. I know it's hard work, and sometimes we talk to a lot of people before we get somebody who needs to register, but keep in mind that the data shows 1 in 3 people who are a brand new registrant will go vote in a presidential year, right? If you think about how marketing works and the number of times that they have to be reminded of something, if they register to vote with us, they get a phone call from us, their parent reminds them, they see an ad on TV, they hear a radio ad, a party reads, some of the DJs read off our fridge card, right there's the 7 reminders, 7 touches, right? That person's going to become a voter. So 1 in 3 new registrants will vote this fall. And if we register 24,000 people, you do the math, right? There's a lot of people right here in North Carolina. All right, and then very briefly, I know folks are interested a little bit in the turnout from the primary. What this graph shows, the reddish orange is for presidential primaries. The purple is for presidential generals. This is a midterm primary and a midterm general. And so what you see here is a cycle, right? It's pretty much generally kind of the same, right? What you see here is that the presidential primary turnout, right here it is, 24.1, not great, right? But pretty much what we expected, right? Pretty much what we expected. So don't let lower turnout in your mind think that there's not going to be higher turnout in the fall. Because look at all these purple lines. These are all the presidential general elections. It's always going to be the highest turnout, right? In these cycles. We hope that it's higher and we hope that it continues to grow. We saw in 2020 historic turnout in a presidential election. But what we know for sure is that there's going to be a lot of attention on a presidential year. We have that governor's race. We have all the congressional races. There's going to be attention in North Carolina. So don't let the experience of the primary indicate what's going to happen in the fall. What we do know, as I mentioned at the start, is that a lot of folks who didn't vote might not have that experience and might be a little bit intimidated, right? What we also find is that brand new voters, sometimes they're just nervous. They're just scared, right? Anytime that we do something that we've never done before, it can be a little nerve-wracking. So we want to meet people where they are. We want to provide the information that we have, support them to make their voting plan, help them get out and go vote. And that means that they are one step closer to building that habit and becoming a lifelong voter. So don't worry about the turnout. Embrace this chaos that some of the rules are going to change, but also know that we are built for this. We're made for this. We know what to expect. And regardless of what might change, we're going to have a fridge card ready and printed within 24 hours, 48 hours at all of our offices, and our website probably even closer. Thank you so much for letting me drone on and on. I'm going to pass it to Cherie here in the office. We are going to get through our materials, and then we're going to have time for questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cherie Witter. I am the communications manager here at You Can Vote. And today we will be talking about our awesome resources that are available online and some that will be available soon. All right. So some of our current materials include our 2024 fridge card, and it's updated with early voting and election day dates for the general election, eligibility requirements, and ID information. As some of you may know, if you volunteered with us before, this is definitely one of the main tools that we use to talk to voters and to just understand, what is going on here in North Carolina and what you can expect in the upcoming election cycle. Right now, it's only available to people or our volunteers during shifts. We do not have it online via our Champions program for right now, but make sure to just tune in and check your emails and the newsletter when it comes out. And also check our social media at You Can Vote NC on Twitter or X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to see when this stuff comes out. All right. Our Know Your Rights guides are here to support all eligible voters and whatever version best fits their needs or their situation. As you can see, we have many different versions, anywhere from our second chance or justice involved voters, students, seniors, and those needing accessibility assistance, non-English speakers, and those who also identify with the LGBTQIA+ community. We also have a general version that will assist North Carolina voters who may fall outside of these specific categories. And similar to the fridge card, you'll find information on voter eligibility, how you properly fill out a North Carolina voter registration form, and much, much more. You can find these guides on our homepage if you scroll down, and also at youcanvote.org/handouts. So this is one of my favorite tools, our What's on the Ballot tool. And we took two different approaches with the way that we wanted to design these. So sometimes, or actually, let me start with this. Can everybody give a thumbs up if you have ever interacted with a voter who thinks that we only vote every 4 years for the president? Right? And I'm pretty sure because you're all voting MVPs, you correct them right there and let them know North Carolina has an election every year, right? So one version that we have is on our left. This is the approach that we took where we wanted to ask voters what issues matter to them and list out which offices directly affect this issue. On the right side, you can see each individual office listed and then their duties underneath. With some voters just not knowing, the different offices that we vote for, we thought that also coming up with the issues approach would be also something to connect students or connect others who just may not know. And we also have an online interactive version that you could find at youcanvote.org/WOB. And from there, you could see offices categorized from local, state, and federal levels to those same issues, but icons instead. So once you click on these tabs, they will pop up and you'll get the exact same information that you would get from our paper copy. And YCV has free downloadable toolkits and pro tips to help you educate, register, and empower your community, your students, your organization, business, whatever. And as we say here at YCV, don't reinvent the wheel. We have anywhere from high school and community toolkits to campus playbooks for college campuses. And then we also have our just general communications toolkit to help people be able to navigate these conversations with new voters. You can find these online at youcanvote.org/toolkits to view what we have currently available. And also please stay tuned because we will have our general election toolkit coming very soon in summer 2024. And again, if you if you signed up for our newsletter, then please stay tuned. Each Wednesday, we have a newsletter coming out, and also make sure to again follow us on social media at YouCanVoteNC. Now, what do we have cooking up for the summer months, right? So we've partnered with Ballot Builder, and we are bringing y'all a very, very, very special project. So I'm sure you'll all be excited about this. Ballot Builder's mission aligns with our mission, so we felt definitely it would be a great partnership for us to come together and present a new nonpartisan candidate voter guide. So people will have access to information on candidates, nonpartisan information on candidates, and it will be readily accessible on our voter guide page, where most of our information you'll find on our fridge cards, things like that, will be on the same page, and that is youcanvote.org/vote. Now, again, this is coming soon, but this is very exciting stuff. And yes, so that is one of our projects coming soon. The next one we're talking student engagement, because as we know, students are key to elections. Last year, we implemented a custom fridge card for North Carolina Central University. And it is this custom fridge card that we felt would be personable and fun for students to have easily accessible information, clear, concise, and accurate information, and it'll all be in one spot, just like our fridge card when we talk to voters outside. But with our colleges, of course, we know that when you register a college student to vote, they have differing addresses depending on their dorm or maybe their campus, things like this. So we felt it would be helpful for students, especially students who have on-campus voting sites and may not know about them, to have this information right at their hand so that they're ready for the fall. And now, as you can see on the right, we have our pledge program. In 2022, we partnered with Pack the Polls at North Carolina State, and we saw a big success. Basically, this pledge program was for students to get involved and receive information about upcoming elections and finding their voting site and knowing what's on the ballot, how to find their sample ballot, looking up their registration, things of that nature. So school administrators, please listen up. We are opening this up to North Carolina schools. We saw a big success with the 2022 program, so we want to offer this program to more schools across the state. So administrators, if you think that your campus would benefit from this, which they definitely would, please reach out to either Caitlin, Kate, or Jennifer Thomas and about inquiring, and they can definitely further help. Also, as we know, addresses change each year depending on whether or not students move from the exact same dorm to a different dorm. Addresses change, and we know that with voter registration forms, we have to keep our addresses up to date for our registration to stay active. So in addition to our resources here, we also have our campus voter registration instructions geared to help individual colleges categorized by county. So in Guilford, you'd be able to find North Carolina A&T, and you could look up their address or et cetera with Duke University as well. And we know that these addresses differ, so just making sure to continuously check and make sure that your address is up to date and your student's address is up to date would be super duper helpful to them and you. And they can find, or you can find this information online at youcanvote.org/campus. All right. And thank you all. Now I will pass it off to Kate Feldman.
So thank you so much for staying in here and paying attention to all these great details and tools. I always say we've got the best team in voting, and we're here 10 years in, ready to fire up the state and help all of our voters cast their ballots successfully. So some actions that you can take: get trained, volunteer with You Can Vote, get other people in our trainings. They're all virtual. We're going to do in person as well. But the basic training, we've got like 2 or 3 a week online, youcanvote.org/training. We want everyone trained on how to talk to voters. And then once you're trained, we want you to come and get involved. Come out and work with us on a shift in the community to build the foundation. If things change, you'll be that much more ready to adapt by getting out and practicing with You Can Vote on a shift. We need good people. We need people to lead our voter registration events. This means that you're working events. It could be a 6-hour day at a festival, coordinating volunteers, or a 3-hour shift at a community clinic or hospital. We need people to lead these voter outreach events. We have a high quality control on our shifts. That we allow volunteers to come. So people who are in these jobs will lead our volunteers, will manage the events that they're working, and we'll be paying for these part-time entry-level positions in civic engagement $25 an hour. So if you know someone who's looking for weekend work, evening work, part-time work, flexible work, parents who want an extra job, that want to get involved and help make this mission possible, we need good folks. So send them to our jobs board. And then invite You Can Vote to come and work with your organization, we come and we will educate voters. We will come and train you and train your constituents or your staff or your members. Get creative, go to the educator request form and tell us about what's happening. And we will get back to you and see if we can staff that event. And then of course, everything costs money and we're paying good wages because it's very competitive out there. There are lots of folks hiring people because this is a battleground state, like Caitlin and I have said. So we want to be able to sustain our staff, pay above and beyond living wages, doing this most critical work of our democracy at a time where nonprofit service staff it's really hard to find, and there's a lot of turnover. So please invest in this program for your future and for the health of our democracy, and connect us with anyone who you think we should be talking to. And as we always say, I've said since the first training, when the first volunteer didn't want to wear an orange t-shirt and asked, is there any other color? Everyone looks good in orange. It is our trusted brand across North Carolina. The voters want the orange shirts because they know we're never going to tell them who to vote for. We're just going to help them with their voting rights and make their vote count. So we're so grateful for you to be here, and Caitlin's going to come up here and help me with this Q&A.
Hey y'all, I just looked over the questions there, and I just want to highlight everything that I just put in the chat is on our website, right? The biggest questions that I saw were about student guides and student addresses. It's on that student page. We also send these out on our weekly emails. We share these on our social media. Last thing I put in the chat was our info or vote@youcanvote.org, which is kind of our landing page for all questions. You can always send us either connections or ideas or questions. Let us know if you see something that we're missing. But I think I answered all the questions in the chat. The training page was just updated. We've got options every week until June. So there's a time that you can join us. I know everything on the handouts page is available to download. Again, I just want to caution, before you print off a ton of stuff, make sure that it's up to date. We might see some changes over the summer. So you'll notice on the Know Your Rights guides and the fridge cards, everything that we do is printed with a printable date. Make sure that you're not accidentally telling something new information or old information when that stuff does change sometimes. So do caution you a little bit. Please don't print off too many of those if you're not going to use them. But our handouts page is fully updated right now. It'll continue to get updated as needed. The training page is full, and the events page as well. So let me look really fast in the chat one more time. I saw a lot of love for Cherie and all those great resources. I saw some great shout outs for the messaging and the positivity. Appreciate that. And then, yeah, how do you get an orange t-shirt? Come to a shift, right? We are doing these trainings, these kickoffs generally online. That's what they're most easiest to find virtually. But if you come to a shift, we will communicate with you ahead of time. We have a captain for every single shift. They'll be in contact with you. So if you sign up for a shift and it's your very first one, they'll be emailing you and saying, hey, what size do you need? So sign up for a shift, come to a training, keep your eye on the email. If something changes, we're going to let you know. Thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. We have 1 minute to spare. Let me scan this really fast. See if there are new. Okay, lots of love. All right, perfect. Thank y'all so much for being here. We really appreciate your time, really appreciate your energy, really appreciate your enthusiasm for supporting North Carolina voters, and hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much, y'all. Thank you.